Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to talk to you a little bit about layers and layer modes. We're going to talk about organizing them and certain settings you can use to change how the layers interact with one another. So currently, if we jump over into my layers panel in the bottom right of my screen, I've got a background layer and I've got the image that I imported in from a previous video. Now you can see that I haven't done anything on my background layer, it's completely white, and we want to keep it that way. In almost all softwares you'll have a default layer, a background layer, layer 1, it could be called a whole number of things, and we often don't do anything on them, we create a new layer straight away. And the reason for this is there's often certain restrictions placed on those layers for the benefit of your file. For example, our background layer has a little lock symbol on it, which makes sure that we always have a background, which makes it nice to print. You can edit these, however, often we want to leave them alone, so I'm not going to cover that in this video. We can talk about it in future projects. Now, to add a new layer, which you may want to do if you want to start painting something, we go down to the bottom right hand corner where we've got this little square with a plus in the center, and we just click on that, and we have a brand new layer. I'm going to talk to you now about what we can see on the screen. So at the very left, we have this eye icon, and we can click on that to hide our layer and click on it again to bring it back. We then have a little thumbnail showing what is on that layer, and then we have the layer name right next to it. So on my image layer, for example, if I click on that, I can click on the name there and change it to image 1 maybe, and layer 1 I'll keep the same. Now there's a few things we may want to do with our layers, and to better explain, I'm going to go into my file and bring in another image. Let's bring in this one here. I can drag it in. There we go. And I'm just going to throw it directly on top and click on the tick. So now I've got two images in my scene, and maybe I'm doing a mood board or something like that, and I want to group all my images together so it makes it easier to edit things or to keep track of all my different layers. Right now I've only got 4 layers, so it's easy to keep track. However, once you start doing, big professional pieces of concept art, you'll end up having hundreds, and you want to group them to keep things organized. It's really easy to do. And what we need to do is we need to select all the layers we first want to put into a group. So I just want to select these 2 layers with my images and put them into a new group, which I'll probably title images. I can click on one image and hold shift to click the one below it, and that'll select both of them. Now, let's say I wanted to select layer 1 and image 1. If I hold shift, you can see it selects all the layers in between. So holding shift may not always be helpful to you. Instead, I can click on layer 1 and hold control, and it will only select the next image I click on. So hold shift and click, selects everything in between. Hold control and click, only selects that layer. In this case, it doesn't really matter because the layers next to each other. To group them, I'm going to go to my bottom toolbar here, and there's a little folder icon. And when I click on that, you can see those layers disappear, and in its place, we have group 1. And if I click on this little arrow on the left of the folder here, that opens up the group, and I can see my layers are there. And I can click on the arrow again to close it up. So you can see how these can really condense and organize your Photoshop layers. And again, I can click on that and change the name. And what I can also do is where I've got my eye icon, I can right click and I can also change the color of my group, which is really useful because even when we have loads of groups together, it can be hard to pinpoint the one we need. So by changing the color, it just helps it stand out a little more. And if we open up our group, you can see that all the layers within that group have changed to the same color. So it just helps keep things a little more organized. Now, that's organizing. What about things like layer modes? Layer modes are really important because they change how two layers interact with one another, and we're going to be using a little bit of that in our project. So let's say I wanted this image here to interact with the image below. Let's say I wanted a bit of texture from both. What I could do is click on the top layer. The top layer is literally the layer above in the layers panel. If I wanted the other image to be the top layer, I'd just click and drag it up, and you can see that they've swapped. To change the layer mode, we go up to this setting here where it says normal. And we have an arrow to the right which opens up a big drop down menu. And as I scroll through these, you can see that now my layers are changing. And what will change will be a mixture of, intensity, saturation, exposure, color. It'll be the pure pattern that we see. If I go to lighten, you see we've got a bit of color coming through, and we've also got some of the rays coming from our previous image. So those two layers are kind of blended together. So this is really important, when we come to overlay, for example, that's used to get the highlights out of certain images. That's very useful, particularly if you're doing nighttime scenes and you want to put lights in. We could talk all day about this, but just practice actually layering the two modes together. What we can also do is just to the right of that, we have an opacity setting, and this changes the opacity of everything on the layer. So if I click on that and drag the slider down, you can see that my image has almost disappeared, and I can bring that back up and it reappears again. So there we go. There's a very brief introduction into layers and layer modes in Photoshop.